Hello, 大家好. Today's guest is Grace. Her family was originally from China and she moved back to China after she grew up in the States. Today, I will ask what has brought her back to China and what she does. Grace, can you briefly introduce yourself, please?
Yes. So my name is Grace and I was born and raised in the US. And I am the eldest daughter to a family of immigrants from China, specifically from Fujian province. And now I am living full-time here in China. I've been here for 2 years almost. So it's been a little bit of time and I'm really excited to be sharing more about my story.
Thank you very much. So you moved to China 2 years ago, right? And before that, so you basically lived in the US and sometimes you visit your family in China, like, using your holiday time.
Yeah, so actually, when I was growing up, I only visited China one time. And I was around 6, 7 years old. Yeah, so I was very young and I don't really remember much from that trip. I didn't really go to China often as a kid because my entire family is in the US. So my 爷爷奶奶, so my dad's parents, my 外公 and 外婆, my mom's parents, plus my mom and my dad are all in the US. So going to China wasn't really something that my family prioritized because multiple generations of my family were in the States. So as a kid, I did not get much exposure to China, and growing up, China just felt very foreign to me.
So when you moved to China 2 years ago, probably it's like kind of mixed feeling, right? So you are going back to the place of your origin, but it's still a foreign land to you.
Yeah, going back to my place of origin is something that I struggle to describe, right? Because I was born and raised in the US. And so I feel like technically my place of origin is the US, but my face and my blood is all Chinese. So coming to China, it also feels like my place of origin because of my appearance. But the way I describe it is I often feel like a banana, right? I feel like I'm white on the inside and yellow on the outside. It's really funny. That's a pretty common way that we describe ourselves as Chinese Americans. That was definitely, something that I felt like a very big disconnect from my Chinese heritage when I was growing up.
I see. Although by appearance you can kind of blend in like when you are in China or any Asian countries, but the way you think is completely different from the people who are around, right, when you are in China.
Yes.
So your family is originally from Fujian, right?
Yes.
So that is why you are currently in Fujian.
I'm currently in Guangdong province, but I spent the last 6 months in Fujian province.
Is it okay to ask you why you decided to come to Guangdong?
Yeah, of course. So right now I'm in Guangdong province after spending 6 months in Fujian, and Guangdong and Fujian province are right next to each other. So it's really easy to travel between one and the other. But essentially, and I'll talk more about this in detail, but I started a company with my partner and we host these homecoming trips, these root-seeking trips to China for overseas Chinese. We call ourselves like Huaqiao, right? Or Huayi in Chinese. And it's basically, someone like me who my family has spent many decades living abroad. And I was born abroad and I felt very disconnected from my Chinese roots. I don't speak Putonghua very well. And I felt like I needed a deep cultural immersion experience in order to reconnect with my roots. So our company, we host these homecoming root-seeking trips to China to help the overseas Chinese community feel more deeper connection to their heritage culture.
That approach is very interesting. I think it's a little bit different from the trip open for anybody, but you focus on to the Hua Jiao Hua Yi, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think the reason why we wanted to have a bit of a narrower focus was because we felt that my partner and I is also a Huaqiao. Because we're both Huaqiao, we understand the culture shocks and the differing perspectives that an overseas Chinese would have. You know, what would intimidate them, what makes them maybe a little nervous about visiting China. We know how, through our own experiences, how to ease some of those nerves and make it an experience that is smooth for them, eases their transition, while also taking into mind bringing them to their ancestral hometowns. So we host these trips mainly in Fujian and Guangdong province because the majority of Huaqiao are from Fujian and Guangdong province.
I can tell that too. Like there are a lot of people who move from Guangdong or Fujian. I see a lot of people in Japan too.
Yes, I was just briefly researching this. There is a lot of people from Fujian that historically traded with Japan and also, you know, moved to Japan for better opportunities, better jobs. And it's really interesting because there are some Fujian influences in Japanese cuisine as well. Yes. You know, we can talk more at length about that at another time, but I am such a huge foodie. Like I am very food motivated whenever I'm traveling or whenever I'm at home, really. And I didn't realize that food can also be a really big way that you can connect with a place. And Chinese people, being so entrepreneurial, have just traveled to pretty much every country in the world and left some type of like cultural mark on the cuisine there. And I think that's really interesting. Like it motivates a lot of my travels these days. Whenever I travel somewhere, I think, okay, number one, I want to try the local specialties. Like what are the local favorites of the people here? And number two, how has the cuisine been influenced by immigration?
That's a good point of view, I think. I also like going to the local shops wherever I go.
Yeah.
So you also mentioned that there are so many culture shocks, like when you came to China. So can I ask, like, for example, what kind of culture shock you had?
Yeah. So I want to go back and actually share a little bit more about how I grew up, because I think that shapes the culture shocks that I experienced in China. So I grew up in a very small town in the US. Even when I tell Americans what state I grew up in, a lot of them don't know where it is.
Really?
It's a small state called Delaware. And Delaware is about an hour and a half from Washington, D.C., and an hour and a half away from Philadelphia. But it's a very small state, so most people forget that it exists. So even within the U.S., I have to explain to people where my state is. But I grew up in a very small town, less than 30,000 people, and there were no Chinese people there.
So everybody looked different from you.
Yes, I had mostly, Caucasian, white, and African American classmates. When you're very young, you don't think you're different from everyone else. You think you're just the same. But of course, as you turn, 7, 8 years old, you start to feel some of those differences when your classmates ask you, where are you from? Like, where are you really from? And I just don't know how to respond. I don't know how to say. Like, I just am like, I'm from here. I was born here. But then people say, no, you're Chinese. You look different. You're Chinese. Do you speak Chinese? As a kid, I don't know how to answer that because I knew I was Chinese, but I didn't know how to explain anything about China because I had such limited exposure to China. You know, people would ask me, do you speak Chinese? And that is also a really tricky question because growing up, my first language was not Mandarin. It was a dialect called Fuzhou Hua. And even in China, a lot of people think, oh, Fuzhou Hua is the same as Minanhua, which Minanhua is spoken in Xiamen and Zhangzhou and Quanzhou, also in, many overseas communities as well. So I have to explain to my classmates, yeah, I speak Chinese, but not the Chinese that you think I speak. It's not Mandarin. So of course it was really confusing. I didn't know how to explain that. So not being around other Chinese people besides my family, not being able to explain my language and my culture, like Fuzhounese culture, right? It was really hard. And I always felt so isolated. I never saw any Chinese role models. I never watched Chinese dramas on my own free time. My family would watch Chinese dramas and listen to Chinese music, but I would only do it with them, but not on my own. In fact, I was more interested in Korean dramas, Korean music, all of that. So when I did come to China in 2023, it was almost my first time because prior to coming to China, I was living in San Francisco, and San Francisco also has a lot of Chinese people. But of course, not nearly as many as being in China, right? So being in China, my biggest culture shock at first was just seeing everyone look like me. I no longer really had to explain myself because I just blend in with people. But the problem is, 我的普通话说不好。I posted a video on 小红书speaking just a tiny bit of 普通话. And some people commented, wow, this girl's 普通话is very American. Even though I don't have to explain my physical appearance, and if I stay quiet and I don't say anything, nobody will ask me any questions. But once I start speaking, people automatically get really confused in China.
Yes.
So I think that was one of the culture shocks for me. I thought, oh, if I come to China, I'm just not going to have to explain myself anymore like I had to when I was growing up. But in China, I do have to explain myself. And a lot of people in China actually have never met a Chinese American before.
Yeah, probably people ask you that 你是哪里人?
Yeah, 你是哪里人? 我说我是美国人。美国？
美国？
可能不是美国人。You can't be from the US. That's not possible. They associate US with blonde hair and blue eyes. So for me, it has been really difficult because I have to not just explain myself, but I have to work really hard to make friends in China. Because the longer I've been here, another shock that I've had is I realized it's not just a language barrier that I'm dealing with in China, it's also a cultural barrier. I have had to learn about so many Chinese norms and customs and Chinese communication. It's really different. I feel like in China, they communicate very indirectly, whereas in the US, typically Americans are very direct in their communication. They say what they're thinking.
So you feel that the Chinese people are not very direct compared to the American people.
Yeah, I feel like the communication style is different for sure. And I think the working style is different as well. You probably experienced a bit of that, when you were working in Shanghai. Like, I think Chinese people typically, for example, they'll say, oh, can we have a meeting in 10 minutes?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And it's like, they're not really suggesting, can we have the meeting? They're saying, no, we are having the meeting in 10 minutes.
Yes. And then suddenly they sent me a message on WeChat. So can we talk now? And now, like I am doing something else. Maybe 5 minutes later, and then like they are like, how?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, and then when you send them a message, they expect you to respond immediately to your messages, and it's just really different. It's a whole different culture, different communication, different norms, different values. And on the values part, right, it's interesting because, my whole family raised me with some Chinese values.
Oh.
For example, they raised me with the value of like working really hard, focusing a lot on your education, getting good grades, earning a big paycheck, earning a lot of money. I feel like that's very common in Chinese households, right? During Chinese New Year, you say, oh, like wishing you health, but also wishing you a lot of wealth, wishing you a lot of money. But I think because I spent my whole life in the US, I also value like work-life balance. I value friendships and quality time. I value taking care of like my body and working out and just having a more balanced lifestyle that's not just centered around work. I think for someone who has never lived in an East Asian country, coming to China, one of the biggest culture shocks is just the mentality around work.
Yes. Like working hard, like working long hours.
Yeah, working long hours and not really being able to speak up for yourself to people of higher levels. I'm guessing it's similar in Japan.
Yeah.
If you disagree with your manager, it's typically not something you should be pointing out to them in a public setting. Maybe in private, but even in private, it carries a really big risk.
Yes.
I was working for a few years in the US, and it was completely different. Like in my work environments, it was expected that we speak up in meetings.
Really? Even to your boss or the people who are in a higher level?
Yes.
Very different.
It's so different because it shows that you have this much deeper sense of authority and leadership ability if you can speak up. So yeah, just a lot of different culture shocks.
True. I think it's, Western and Eastern, especially the Asian culture difference. So Japan and China, obedience is more important when you work for a company. Even if you can do a good job as an individual, but if you are not obedient to your boss or the people who are on a higher level, probably they wouldn't like you.
Yeah. That is how I was raised at home. Like at home, it was always like I had to listen to my parents. I had to listen to my grandparents. Whatever they say, I do. But it was really difficult because at work, I was expected to advocate for myself and show that I have a loud presence in the room. And I struggled with that. Honestly, I did.
It's confusing, right?
It was really confusing. My home environment, the way I was raised and socialized by my family was so different than a typical American environment. So coming to China, I've also had to kind of like learn, how do I adapt to this new environment, this new context?
But now, slowly, you understand why your parents or grandparents told you this is what you should do or shouldn't do. Because now you are in China and slowly getting to understand the way the Chinese people do, right?
Yeah. So when I was growing up, I had a lot of conflicts with my family. And I mean, I still do. Everyone has conflicts with their family. But growing up, it was especially difficult because I had never known true hardship. When my family was living in China, they were poor farmers. Basically, my entire family lived in poverty. They didn't have access to higher education. They didn't have job opportunities beyond farming the land that they were living on. And my grandma even tells me that when she was a kid, her father, so my great-grandfather, passed away from starvation, not having enough food. He didn't have enough food to eat, and so he passed away because of that. And I could not understand those things until I came to China. How I started to understand those things is I actually went to my family's village. Their village is still in Fujian. It's still, the buildings are still there, actually. And my grandma and my grandpa still have a house in the village that they own. And my dad used to live there and grew up there, and my aunt did as well. And when I saw their village, when I saw what conditions they used to live in, that is when I started to understand. Because when you're a kid, you assume, oh, your family is just telling you these things about, oh, their life in the past, just so that they can scare you. Just so that they can motivate you, right?
Yeah.
But I thought those things couldn't really possibly be true. But then I came here and I realized, wow, they really lived in really tough conditions. So that was what partially inspired us to start this company. Because I think so many, overseas Chinese grow up and they live a life of privilege. They never have to worry about where their food is coming from or if they'll be able to eat. They'll never have to worry I won't have a home. Everything is all your basic needs are cared for, and you live a life of very likely being able to go to college, being able to work a job after graduating, and being able to achieve new levels that your family never achieved. But in the process, you do often have this huge gap in understanding between you and your family, right? Your family grew up in one world and you're now growing up in a completely different world. So I think that is what we're trying to do. We're trying to not just facilitate cultural bridges between China and the US, but we're also trying to help bridge generational gaps as well for families that may not understand each other because of that. Sure. This is really, really common amongst many immigrant groups, actually. If we look at, historically, Japanese Americans, Indian Americans, Vietnamese Americans, Korean Americans, their life changed drastically when they moved to the US. And as a result, their children, their grandchildren, have just this huge generational gap, a different perception of the world. And I think that is what we're really trying to provide, a level of nuance in understanding of the world. And I do want to add that we not just provide trips to China for overseas Chinese, we also provide trips for people who just have a really deep interest in China, but want to travel to places beyond Beijing and Shanghai, because we want to provide a deeper level of nuance to foreigners. We mentioned this in our call before about how so many foreigners don't visit Fujian. And a lot of foreigners, they just go the typical route, Beijing, Shanghai, maybe Chongqing, and maybe Shenzhen. But beyond that, they don't venture out to the lesser known provinces. So we definitely want to be hosting trips to lesser known provinces. For example, Fujian or Yunnan or Guizhou or Guangxi because these provinces just have so much to offer that shows different levels of China. I mentioned, like, I visited my family's village. That experience was so transformative for me. And I believe that even if you don't have a personal connection to a village, you should still visit, like, the more rural parts of China. And the reason I believe you should do that is because when you visit the more rural countryside, you start to see that life in China is so different depending on where you are. It's not just a stressful, busy metropolis, but it can also be peaceful and very, very scenic, full of nature. And also villages are also places where a lot of the villagers have never seen a foreigner before. So when you go there, they're so curious. They ask so many questions. And they stop to get to know you. Sometimes they invite you to their house for tea. Wow. And they are like, come celebrate Chinese New Year with us, you know? So I think what we're trying to promote is really just like tourism in China that goes beyond the major modern cities.
And those smaller cities, harder for them to go by themselves. So I think they will need your help.
Yeah, and that would be my goal if I visit Japan, which is to be able to drive out to the countryside and be able to talk to elders, for example. Of course, before that, I have to learn some Japanese, but, you know, talking to people in the villages and asking them about their life and their stories and finding connection in those moments of quiet and solitude and, you know, more like places that very few people go to.
Yeah, like, you know, very different. I still have a lot to explore in China, especially I really want to go to more of the smaller cities as well. And people who has been to those smaller cities always said that China is huge. Every place is a very different culture. Sometimes, like you said, like Fuzhou has Fuzhou Fa. So the language is also different, right? Sometimes.
Yes, the language is different too. Actually, it's so funny because people say when they first visit China, they say, oh, China's all the same. But the longer you spend in China, the more you start to see the differences across different provinces and regions. I'll give you an example. So when I first met my partner, he asked me what we eat for Chinese New Year. And I said that we typically eat fish and lobster and shrimp. We have rice cakes that we stir fry. You've probably seen that before, right? Stir fry. We have just like a lot of like seafood. That I think that's like the main part of our meal. And he said that he eats dumplings. In addition to dumplings, like a bunch of other dishes too, but the main like star is like dumplings. That's because he's from a northern Chinese province where dumplings, they look like Chinese, kind of like old Chinese currency. So it symbolizes like wealth and prosperity.
Interesting. Very different.
Exactly. In the South, and I can't generalize for everyone, like not everyone in southern China eats seafood. But a lot of southern Chinese families have at least a fish because a fish also symbolizes prosperity. So when you start to travel around different parts of China, you realize the food changes a lot. The languages, dialects change. The landscape changes. And I think that is what we are really trying to show people, that China is not just a monolith, that it is full of different cultural traditions and history, and it's just so diverse depending on where you go.
True. Also appearance, although So the Chinese people basically Asian looks, but if you go to northern part of China, a lot of people usually have whiter skin, but when it comes to the southern part of China, a lot of people actually has a little bit darker skin, I realize.
Yes, that also has to do with the weather, yeah.
Yeah. And then southern people has bigger eyes as well.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like,
yes,
I myself, when I was in the US, thought that every Chinese person eats a certain way and talks a certain way and acts a certain way because, like I mentioned before, most overseas Chinese come from Guangdong and Fujian. And so when you're in the US and you go to a Chinese restaurant, it's very likely that it's going to be Guangdong cuisine or Fujian cuisine, but more likely it's Guangdong cuisine. And I thought that's just what everybody in China eats. But no.
No, right?
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, China has developed very quickly, though. You know, you can get, for example, Guangdong food in northern China, even in like a place like Harbin, right, up in the very north, you could find a Cantonese restaurant. But that does not reflect what the local people eat on a daily basis.
And then I also heard that the people in Fujian and Guangdong, they don't eat much of spicy food, right?
Correct.
So that means when you first ate the spicy food in China, probably you were surprised, I guess.
A lot of people are shocked when I say that I haven't been to Chengdu or Chongqing. And it's because I'm really scared of eating spicy food.
So I want to tell you that a lot of Japanese people think that Chinese people can eat spicy food, but the reality is not everybody, right? Some Chinese people are not good at spicy food.
Oh, do Japanese people think that Chinese people really like spicy food, like all of them?
Yeah, because our typical way of impression is that because Chinese foods are spicy. Because in Japan, the most popular Chinese cuisine is Sichuan cuisine.
Oh, it's Sichuan cuisine?
So a lot of people think Chinese food equals spicy.
Oh, I didn't know that. Wow, that's so interesting.
Interesting, right?
Yeah.
After Sichuan cuisine, people like to eat Guangdong cuisine. And then people know that Guangdong cuisine is not spicy. But still a lot of people think, Chinese food, mapo tofu.
That's really funny too, because I grew up eating mapo tofu, but my grandma makes it like not spicy.
Really?
So I think in China, like things are changing really quickly as well because of internal migration. Actually, like one thing I was really surprised is like I was in Fuzhou for 6 months, and when I was there, you know, I listened very closely to people, and I realized there was a lot of Sichuan people living in Fuzhou because they come there for work. And they bring spicy flavors to Fuzhou. You know, some of them open like Sichuan restaurants. Now, because of a lot of migration from Sichuan to Fujian, a lot of Fujian people have developed a preference for spicy food. But it's always evolving. I think, you know, young people in China are very adaptable. Yeah, young people especially are very curious. They want to try different kinds of cuisine. I'm sure you noticed in China, Japanese cuisine has just blown up everywhere, and it's so popular. And it's so funny to see that for me, because my parents grew up at a time where eating raw fish was very, in their minds, very dangerous.
Really?
Yes. So my parents still, because they haven't really traveled to Japan before and they haven't spent much time in China, they do not eat any raw fish.
Really? So they don't eat sushi?
No.
Wow.
Not at all. Whereas when you come to China, you see so many people, young people, older people, they love sushi. And I think I want to bring up like one concept that is like really interesting I recently learned. It's called the immigrant time capsule.
Immigrant time capsule.
Yes. So an immigrant time capsule is really, really describing just what happens to an immigrant after they've left their home country. So in this example, obviously I'll give China. My parents, their perception of China got stuck in the year that they left.
I understand what you mean.
My grandpa left China in the 1970s. And then my mom and dad came in like the 80s and the 90s. So their perception of China is just, oh, China's really dirty. China is really dangerous. And China is really chaotic. There's some degree of truth to it, right? There's some places where it can be chaotic and dirty, maybe a little dangerous, but not nearly as dangerous as they think it is. But when I was growing up, that's part of the reason they didn't bring me to China. Because they thought, oh, you know, our poor American daughter, she will not like it. For them, they never really like delivered this like positive view of China to me. Of course, they said, oh, you should be proud that you're Chinese. But they didn't really tell me, oh, you should visit China. China's amazing. Like that was never part of the story.
That is also why you haven't been back to China often when you were younger.
Yes. So a big reason why I decided to come to China was because my partner, he was born here and he lived here until he was 9 years old. And after that, he moved to the US. But after moving to the US, he returned to China every summer. Because his 爷爷 and 奶奶 are in China. So when he had that connection, that family connection to China, he was able to come back. He saw China grow and change. You know, he rode on one of the very first 高铁, like from his hometown to Beijing. And when I met him, he told me China has high-speed trains. And I said, what? What? Are you kidding me? Nobody told me that. I was almost like in disbelief, but also like a little bit of like anger and frustration. Why didn't anybody tell me? Like you told me you went to Shanghai in 2015, right?
2016.
2016, yeah. You know, you got to see Shanghai in a really, really great time. You know, very, very modern, very clean, very safe.
Yeah.
But, you know, my parents, I don't think they've been to Shanghai before. So how are my parents supposed to tell me, right?
Yeah.
And some people say, oh, like, why don't you just, you know, go and visit? I think one of the biggest barriers for me was because I can't speak 普通话 very well.
So within your family, you haven't really used 普通话. So, but you only use Fuzhou with your family.
Exactly.
How did you learn Mandarin? How did you learn 普通话?
So that's part of the reason why I decided I really want to spend more time in China and actually live here. Because my language skills have improved a lot since being here.
Oh.
Like I can hold basic conversations at least. I can introduce myself, you know, my comprehension has improved a lot. And I haven't taken any like formal classes. Most of what I've learned has just been outside, living here. So yeah, I think like a lot of Huaqiao actually have this problem. I don't know if you know this, but most Huaqiao, there's something called they can listen and they can understand, but they cannot speak. A lot of immigrant parents, they want their kids to focus on learning the new language, whether that's English or whatever other language it is. And think, oh, if I teach my kids another language, then they're going to get confused and their English is not going to be good enough. So therefore, I'm just going to focus on English or whatever it is.
And
it really takes a certain kind of parent to say, no, you have to learn your mother tongue. The mother tongue preservation is definitely something that only some parents see the importance of.
And besides, because you went to the local school in the States, you didn't really have a chance to learn, like academically learn Chinese language, right, when you were younger?
No, not really. Like there weren't really any international schools or immersion schools where I was. In the US, international and immersion schools are typically in very big cities. So I just didn't have that. There weren't any. I did do something called like a weekend, like a Sunday or Saturday Chinese school where we go like once a week for a couple hours. But when you study a language once a week for a couple hours and then you don't use that language, you're probably not going to retain it.
So it must have been a lot difficult for you to learn reading or writing. So reading and writing part must be very difficult for you as well, right?
Yes. So admittedly, my reading and writing is still quite poor. So I'm still learning. The good thing is though, when you're in China, it accelerates your learning very, very quickly. Like, and it makes you realize like what to focus on too. When I was a kid and I went to like the Sunday school to learn Chinese, I remember, you know what they would make us learn? Ancient Chinese poetry. You know, things that aren't very relevant to everyday life. So, you know, if you're listening to this and you're thinking like, oh, I want to learn Chinese, how should I learn? Like my biggest recommendation personally is you should live in China and be forced to learn how to communicate to your delivery driver. Speak to your mailman, communicate to the woman at the pharmacy, right? I think that's the best way to learn. Once you're put in a situation where you have to learn a language in order to survive, that's when you learn.
Taxi drivers in China has been a really good language partner for me always because they usually don't speak any foreign languages, and some taxi drivers are very talkative that they always want to talk with me.
Exactly. The taxi drivers are great. You know, they're always so curious about where you're from and everything. I think that's really a great thing. And in addition to that, you know, I spent 6 months in Fuzhou, my family's hometown. And thankfully, there is a small part of the population that still speaks Fuzhou Hua. So when I'm in Fuzhou, my Fuzhou Hua comes out.
So you can communicate with them using Fuzhou Hua.
Yeah, exactly. So it's usually, you know, people who are older, people who are, you know, my mom and dad's age or my grandma and grandpa's age, and their Fuzhou Hua is great. So when I talk to them, it feels like home. When I first arrived, it didn't feel like home because it was a strange place. I'd never been there before. But now, after spending quite a lot of time there, it felt like home because I can communicate in my dialect. I actually still feel more comfortable speaking Fuzhou Hua rather than Putong Hua.
Really?
Yeah. You know, you can ask a lot of Huaqiao how they feel about that. A lot of Huaqiao that I've met, they do prefer to speak Cantonese or Minnan Hua or even like Wenzhou Hua. Wenzhou has a big like community of Huaqiao as well. So it's really interesting. Like once you start looking into like overseas Chinese and like where they're from, like you'll start to see there's a lot.
So one of the biggest reasons for you to move to China is hearing all the stories from your partner who is also Huaqiao. And then those stories made you feel interested in, I want to explore more about the country.
That's exactly right. So my partner, he inspired me to visit China because he started telling me stories from his childhood. He told me about how China is such a special place for him because his family is there, and his biggest role model is his grandpa, and his grandpa is still here actually. His grandpa is like in his 90s.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really great. And I got to meet his grandpa and talk to him. Meeting him was a huge stimulus for me to decide to be more curious about China. It wasn't until I met him that I started watching, China travel vlogs. I went on YouTube and I searched up China and I searched up all these different places, and I started watching more videos and being, wow, like, this is actually really cool. Like, China's really not what I expected it to be.
Really?
And then, he suggested, after we'd been together for a couple years, he suggested we go and visit China. And you know what's funny? At first, I said no, because I want to visit Japan instead. I'm not trying to say like that you shouldn't visit Japan. I'm still wanting to visit Japan. It's not a competition at all, but I think I was more interested in visiting Japan because I really, really love Japanese food. And I have seen so many videos on social media about Japan, and I thought, okay, like everybody's going, all my friends are going to Japan, so I should go. And I was living in California, and in California, there's just such a huge population of Japanese Americans and Japanese restaurants. But no, he said we should visit China because my grandpa is there. And I really want you to meet my grandpa. So when we visited, it completely changed my mind. It completely made me realize and made me fall in love with China. And we made the decision to move to China 6 months after that.
Wow, that's so great. And then you decided to help more Fuzhou Huayi to explore their roots.
Yes, exactly. The motivation was to recreate the experience that we had for others.
So if they want to go on a trip using your service, what kind of tour they can expect?
So if you do come on a trip with us, I think number one is that we are always going on the trip with you. So myself and my partner, we lead every single trip from start to finish. And we have been on the ground and personally select every single hotel, every single restaurant. We custom create every itinerary based on our own experiences there. In addition to that, in every place that we bring you to, we really try to connect you with the local community. So just like how you're doing, organizing meetups, we also organize meetups during our trips. So we organize dinners, for example, where our travelers get to meet with our local friends. Our local friends who are learning English, they are really eager to meet foreigners. And we arrange these cultural exchange, learning language exchange opportunities so that our travelers not just are visiting a place, but really getting to know a place through its people. And in addition to that, I think one of the things we really emphasize is getting to have a breadth of experience in China. Throughout our trips, we typically start in a really big city, and then as the trip progresses, we go to more rural countryside destinations. And I think that is really interesting because you start to see the layers of China as the trip progresses. And, in addition to that, I think what we really do emphasize is understanding the local culture and the local cuisine. On our trips, we dive really deep into the local festivals. For example, we try to learn a bit of the local language and the local food. And I think that is what makes our trips really special. They're very deep dives in the regions that we travel to. So if you come to Guangdong with us, we're going to deep dive into a certain part of Guangdong. And if you come to Fujian with us, we're going to deep dive into a certain region of Fujian. And if you do a trip with us that's specifically for the root seeking, the heritage seeking, we will be visiting, if we can locate, your family's ancestral village.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds very...
It's really hard though. I'm not going to lie. Like when you try to find someone's ancestral village, it requires a lot of work in the months beforehand. So we actually do a lot of work before the trip even starts to use whatever documentation is available, try to track down the village's location. Sometimes the villages are no longer there, but you'd be surprised. In Guangdong and Fujian, a lot of the villages are still there.
Oh, really?
Yes. So we have some of our clients come to us with a very, very old birth certificate from someone in their family, or a very old photo of, you know, someone in their family, or a tombstone. Some tombstones even have the names of where your ancestor is from. And bringing our travelers to these ancestral villages makes the trip so much more meaningful because it creates a deep personal connection to your family.
It sounds like it needs a lot of preparation beforehand.
Yeah, it does. It's really something we put a lot of intention around. You know, we don't want the trip to be just about going to a high-tech, modern metropolis per se. Of course, like shopping is fun, but I think we really put out a lot of intention into creating this as a self-reflective, pivotal life experience that really changes your view of yourself and your family and how you define your identity. And what we encourage is all of our travelers to embrace a multicultural identity. Right? Like, you don't have to choose one or the other. I think in today's world, we're very divided. And politics is very divided and very complicated. But what we're trying to tell people is, irrespective of geopolitics, you should be able to choose your identity and how you, associate. And that if you are Chinese American, Chinese Canadian, Chinese Australian, wherever you are, you should be proud of that and you should own that.
Well, that's a very amazing of what you do.
Thank you.
That is what you want to keep doing it, right? While you in China. And so besides that, is there anything else that you want to do? So when you are in China?
We have so many ideas.
Really?
What we're really excited about is very similar to what you're excited about, right? Which is bridging China with the world. It's funny because, in the past, I wasn't ever this excited about this cause and this mission. But after living in China for so long, I think China changes you. It makes you so excited about people from different cultures and people from different places, and makes you so excited about languages and learning more about history. And I think, after you've lived in China, you start to feel like, okay, I need to show more people what China is all about. So regardless of if it's through China travel or China content or whatever it is, I think long term, I just want to do something that's related to cultural exchange with a focus on China and other countries.
That's very exciting. Although I don't have a Chinese origin, but I would like to join your tour someday.
Oh, yes. We would be so excited to show you around. I think what we would be really excited to do is bring you to, we talked about earlier, the more countryside parts, to see villages and to talk to, grandmas and grandpas and understand them and their stories and their history. So we would love to.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. So the last question, not really a question, is there anything that you would like to say to the podcast listeners, so especially the people who has never been to China?
Yes. I think For anyone who has not been to China before, one of the biggest things that I have to say is try to keep an open mind and just make the trip and, you know, really, really embrace the experience beyond just the big cities.
Wow.
I know it's so tempting to just go to Beijing and Shanghai, maybe adding, you know, Chongqing and Shenzhen and Guangzhou.
Yes.
But when you're going on a trip, especially if you're living, you know, in a big city already, you're going from one big city to another big city, it can feel very overly stimulating. And like for you, you know, you grew up in a smaller town, right? You sometimes probably still feel overwhelmed by the number of people in Tokyo.
Yeah.
If you're coming to China, you know, come to some of the more off the beaten path destinations. And how to find those places, you know, you can start with Xiaohongshu, Note, and start searching up like provinces that you've never heard of before. Last year, I traveled to Guizhou, and I never heard of Guizhou before. But after we went there, wow, it's one of my favorite provinces if you love mountains and nature and just nature everywhere, rice fields everywhere. So yeah, I think really just try to go to places that aren't social media viral. And you might enjoy your trip more than you would have expected.
Thank you very much, Grace.
Yeah, of course.